Bohannon, and I am the founder of Sseko Designs. At 22, I graduated from university with a degree in journalism. I moved to Uganda in East Africa on my own because I wanted to learn more about the reality of women and girls living in extreme poverty. So I started volunteering, doing communication work for a couple different nonprofits based there. And while I was there, I met an incredible group of young women. These young women had incredible dreams for themselves and for their communities and for their families, and they were getting ready to graduate from high school. In Uganda, there's a 9-month gap between high school and college, intended to allow students that actually test into college to find time, to find a job, to make money, to pay for it. These young women, although they were in the top 10% of students in their country and tested into college, were unable to attend because they were from backgrounds of extreme poverty and lacked both the finances and the social and cultural support to continue their educations. This was totally mind-boggling to me. And I wanted to be a part of seeing these young women who had become dear friends continue on to university, become leaders in their communities, in their country, and ultimately, our world. So I decided to start a sponsorship program, a nonprofit, because that's what you do when you're an American and you go to Africa. You start charities. And then I changed my mind. That's a whole nother story. And then I started a chicken farm, and that failed pretty quickly because I find chickens to be kind of gross. And that's a whole nother story. And then I designed a pair of strappy, funky sandals with interchangeable laces that can be tied and styled in tons of different ways. And I went to the school and I hired 3 women, Mary, Mercy, and Rebecca. And I promised them that if they made these sandals for the next 9 months, that they would go to university. So I moved back to the US and I started selling these sandals out of the back of my car, which is exactly what your parents want you doing with that college degree. But it actually remarkably worked. We've grown into a full lifestyle brand. We sell sandals and shoes and handbags and scarves and accessories. And we've enabled 47 women who have gone through our work-study program, who have earned enough money to go on to university, and who are becoming the leaders of Uganda today. In addition, we provide full-time employment to over 60 women in Uganda. It's somehow actually working. Thank you. And that's it. That's my story. We're hiring, and you can buy the sandals up in the marketplace. Just kidding. That's why I think I got invited to this conference in the first place. But as Jeff told you, our conversation that we had when he invited me was really different than any other conference I've ever been invited to, because what Jeff asked me was not what do you normally talk about, but what's keeping you up at night these days? What are you really thinking about? I've never been asked that by a conference organizer before. So I took this as an opportunity to tell Jeff about my experience with conferences. I told Jeff that when I get invited to come speak to mixed groups, such as yourselves, men and women, it's usually about things like doing business in Africa and building up local economies. Or it's about social enterprise, how we can use really innovative market-based solutions to solve the world's most pressing problems. I get to tell people to be creative and to take risks and to not be afraid of things and to live a great story, and it's super fun, and I love it, and it's awesome. And then when I get invited to speak about why I've chosen to build our entire business around educating and empowering women, that gender inequality is, in my opinion, one of the greatest issues facing our generation today, it's usually at women's conferences. I told Jeff that, to be honest, I'm a little bit sick of being invited to all women conferences, sitting on all female panels, talking to all female audiences about this issue. I told Jeff what I wanted to do was speak to men about this. Because here's the thing. Men have largely created our culture. Let's be serious. You run our businesses, you run our government, our media, and our churches. You've done a lot of really incredible things. You've also made plenty of mistakes because you're humans. But the reality is you have a really unique position in our culture. You have a platform, you have status, and you have power. And I want to invite more men into the conversation about gender equality. There is amazing, powerful work being done by women all over the world. But the next step of change will happen when the people with traditional power get on board and actually start doing something. And the reality is that is not going to happen if the lady preachers keep getting invited to preach to the all-lady choir. So I told Jeff, here's the thing. I want you to be a part of this conversation because I believe in you. I believe that there are a lot of really good men in this audience. And for any man who feels like they've never been invited into the conversation about gender inequality, mark this as a significant moment in your story. I, Liz Forkin Bohannon, self-professed leader of the feminist movement, am inviting every single one of you into the conversation. Men, we need you. We need you to come to the table. Our daughters need you. Our sons desperately need you. So join me. Walk alongside of me, challenge me, learn from me about how together we can create a more beautiful and just world for women and men alike. So I told Jeff that's what I wanted to do. And he was like, wow, okay. And I was like, really? Okay. And he's like, yeah, go for it. And I was like, oh, okay. So I sat down. I've never given this talk before, and I started thinking about, wow, what do I want to say? And I immediately thought of what I didn't want to say. I was thinking, okay, what do you do when you're speaking to all men? Probably a lot of Southern men. What should I not say? And I decided that I was not going to use the word feminism. Because I would hate to use a word that would conjure up some extreme stereotype that would cause all of the men in the audience to get defensive or annoyed or flustered or probably at worst just write me off. No, I decided that I was going to give a whole talk about gender inequality without using the F word. And I was just going to trick you into becoming feminist without you even realizing it. And then I realized that that really doesn't give you guys a lot of credit. And it certainly doesn't challenge you to speak and think beyond your stereotypes. A couple of weeks ago on Facebook, preparing for this talk, I asked the men in my community, who identifies as a feminist? Almost all of them said, not really. And almost all of them said that because when they think of feminism, they think of angry, bra-burning, man-hating women. If you are a man or a woman who has excused yourself from using your power, your voice, and your platform to further the movement for gender equality, I'm going to call you out on a really basic principle, especially for any of you who consider yourselves culture creators. Stereotypes are super lame. You can certainly choose not to be a feminist. I cannot make you do anything with my magic microphone wand, but here's what I'm asking. I am asking you to understand what it is you are choosing to be against, and to please do not make that decision based on the most radical beliefs of a group. Anyone in here identify politically as conservative? You do realize that half of our country and a lot of our world thinks this about you? Any liberals in the room? Anybody? Really? Even though you aspire to be more than these guys? Any Christians in the room? Does that mean you follow this guy hook, line, and sinker? Or that you want to sit next to this girl at the lunch table? Let's be serious. It applies to every single group that exists. Jews, Muslims, homosexuals, capitalists, environmentalists, lawyers, Americans. Anytime there is more than two people that come together to do anything, there is going to be a broad spectrum of opinions and personalities. But if it's something you really care about, if it's something you really find value in, you don't just deny your affiliation wholesale and decide not to have an opinion. You engage the conversation and you decide to move the needle forward. That's it. That's feminism. That is, at its very core, what you are choosing to stand beside when you choose to stand beside us. It's about equality and it's about civil rights. And neither of those things are dirty words that I need to avoid while I'm talking to you. Of course, not everything that every feminist has ever said is good. Not every part of every feminist wave or movement is good, because movements are never 100% good, and they're never 100% perfect, because they're made up of humans. But feminism is the reason that I got to go to school. It's the reason that I got to go to college, and it's the reason I got to have a bank account, and it's the reason that I got to choose my husband, and it's the reason that I got to start a company, and it is most definitely the reason that I have the privilege to stand here and talk to you today. So much of who I am and what I've been afforded is because of the brave men and women who have gone before me in the name of feminism. So I don't want to ignore it. Listen, this talk is not necessarily to get everybody in this room to self-identify as a feminist, because at the end of the day, words are words and labels are labels. But I think it is really powerful to name yourself. Because change happens when people decide to be for something. It happens when people decide to stand together alongside one another in the name of something that is bigger than themselves. So stand beside me. But first, I have some myth busting to do. Okay, myth number 1. All feminists are angry, man-hating, bra-burning women. Listen, there are a lot of male-bashing feminists out there. I will tell you that. And I am not going to make excuses for them because I do not believe that that is true gender equality. I will say, the next time you meet a feminist of the angry variety, please do me a favor, and instead of holding her up as the reason that you would never participate in this movement, ask yourself, what is it that she's fighting against? Why is she so angry, and what's made her so passionate about this? Be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a battle, feminists included. But next, if you've never actually met a feminist who's caused you to question some of the things that you think about feminists, I am happy to lend myself to you to be your token first feminist friend. So, starters, I love men. Whoa, shocker! I got married at 23 to the man of my dreams who I daily believe is making me a better version of myself. I am more proud of my marriage than anything that I've done in my career. I love working with men, I love creating with men, I love building cool stuff with men. I'm really thankful for bras. I can't wait to be a mom someday. I consider myself politically moderate. I am a follower of Jesus and an active member in my faith community. I generally like to have a good time, and I always let my husband carry the heavier backpack when we're hiking. Sometimes I pretend not to know how much heavier it is, but I definitely never fight him on it. And here's the thing. None of those things are anti-feminist. So if you've never met a feminist who loves men, wears a bra, and generally likes to have a good time, it is a pleasure to meet your acquaintance. And I promise that there are more of us out there than you think. Myth number 2. Gender inequality doesn't actually exist anymore. Especially not in the US. Women do 66% of the world's labor and earn less than 10% of the world's income and own less than 1% of the world's assets. Women and girls make up 98% of victims of trafficking for sexual violence. A leading cause of death among pregnant women, get this, intimate partner homicide. That means being murdered by your husband or boyfriend. A woman serving in our military in the US, because these are not just international issues, was more likely to be raped by a fellow American soldier than she was killed in enemy fire. 20% of women in our colleges in America have been sexually assaulted. I'm sorry, these are not women's issues. These are human issues. Arguably, these are men's issues. Because to the home fry that killed his pregnant wife, or to the run-of-the-mill accountant who's participating in commercial sex, or to the college student who took advantage of his drunk girlfriend, something has gone terribly wrong. Not just for her, but for him too. What happened to these little boys? What messages did they receive as teenagers that made them believe that these were viable choices for a grown man to make? And who will be the good men that will stand up and that will fight for our sons? Listen, if statistics don't necessarily speak to you and you're generally suspicious of them, let me tell you something about my life. The day I sat down to write this talk a couple weeks ago, I was in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. I spent the morning down in a really busy, crowded market. I was sourcing materials for our spring-summer footwear line. And I was groped and grabbed 4 times. I had my hair pulled really hard twice, and I witnessed a variety of very vulgar gestures and words that were directed towards me. I was just doing my job. Earlier this year, my sister, a couple months into her new job, was grossly sexually harassed by her boss. When she brought it to HR and filed a complaint against him, they told her that, well, boys will be boys, and that's just kind of the way he is. So you either need to look the other way or you can quit. So she, a super bright, brilliant, career-driven young woman, quit her job and started working as a waitress while she found a new one. It's pretty hard to hit that glass ceiling us feminists love to talk about when you're making decisions about your career, not based on climbing the ladder, but on avoiding misogynistic, abusive bosses. A few months ago, one of my team members was gang raped in her own home. She still hasn't told hardly anybody because she's really ashamed and she's really afraid of the social consequences. And the thing is, she's not alone. 60% of rapes in America do not get reported. 5% of rapists end up being incarcerated. Women. I'm sure there are a lot of you that actually identify with one or more of these stories. If they don't, I would ask you to urge you to exercise some solidarity and recognize that millions, billions of women across the globe do not have access to the same rights to respect and safety that you do. Men, if this is surprising to you, here is your first step in becoming a male ally for gender equality. Listen to me. Believe me. Ask the women in your lives about what it's like being a woman, and be willing to hear the answers. Myth number 3, only men can be sexist and only women can be feminist. I was told by a female teacher that I could never be president because women are far too emotional and irrational, and men wouldn't listen to a female leader anyway. Apparently, most of our country agrees with her so far. A recent Johns Hopkins study says that 70% of men living in rural Uganda believe it is morally justifiable to beat their wives on one or more occasions for one or more reasons. The even crazier thing here is that 90% of women in Uganda hold the same belief. So here's the thing. If I'm going to call you to a higher standard, I have to be accountable to the same. And I will admit to you that I can be a sexist too. What? I thought she was a feminist. Now she's saying she's a sexist. Ah! Here's the thing. I've had to recognize and apologize twice in the last 3 weeks for something sexist I said or did. I at times let myself slip into the very sexist belief that if only women ran the world, things would be better off. And the reality is that could not be further from the truth. Because the goal of true gender equality is the recognition that anytime men or women are pushed out of any space, we all suffer. And we can't just keep holding up the badass women that exemplify male success without also holding up the men that are questioning the traditional constructs of masculinity and power and privilege. It is wonderful to tell our daughters that they should be smart and strong and bold. But who's telling our sons that true masculinity and strength is also about gentleness and self-respect and humility? Myth number 4. Being a good guy is good enough. So wrap your brains around this. Male violence towards women will cause more injury, death, and ill health to women across the globe than malaria and traffic accidents combined. Okay? Men are the number one threat to being a woman. Now, I wish I could see the little cartoon bubbles popping up in the room. For the women, I think it would be something like, oh gosh, were you thinking that Tinder date after plywood tonight? And for some of the guys, yeah, but not all men are rapists and wife beaters. Here we go, another feminist accusing me of being evil. Yes, you are correct. Not all men are evil. Not all men beat their wives. Not all men are rapists. Not all men abuse their female employees. This is obviously true. But the response, yeah, but not all guys. It is not the response of a man working towards gender equality. Because it's egocentric and it's a little bit defensive. And what it says to me is that you care more that I know specifically that you're not a bad guy than you care to know and learn and understand a reality that you hope to change. Being a good guy isn't good enough. Name one meaningful social revolution that happened because enough people just weren't being bad. The Holocaust? Civil rights movement? No. The arc of the moral universe will bend towards justice. I believe, like MLK, that is true. But here is the thing. It will not bend just because you're not being bad. The arc bends when really good people decide to be the loudest. When good people stand up and make personal sacrifices to actually change the tide. Myth number 5. Guys can't be feminists, and definitely not guys like you. Listen, I don't want you to change. You most likely don't have to quit your job or change your wardrobe or stop watching football. We need you to be male allies right where you are, in your jobs, in your families, with your friends. If you are an upper middle class white male, looks to be largely the case in this room, you have created a big part of our culture. But that does not mean that you haven't also been negatively impacted by the culture that you've been born into. Listen, we all have to deal with the collective history of our past. But the amazing thing is, we have the privilege and the honor of becoming co-creators of the legacy of our generation. I believe that our generation's legacy will be better than the one left to that, and I want you to be a part of it. Now, I can give you 10 action steps of things that you should do, but I believe that actions are meaningless unless we change belief systems. And the first part about changing belief systems, I believe, is asking hard questions and being honest with really hard answers. A few weeks ago, I sent my husband an email about the Yes All Women movement on Twitter in response to the shooting in Santa Barbara. He emailed that same article on to 10 of his friends. They all emailed back, and what happened, I think, was really powerful. Now, before I tell you more about this, I'm going to tell you a little bit about these guys, because what I don't want you thinking is that I'm telling you some big grand story about guys that aren't really normal guys. No. These guys email back several times a week. 99% of it is about Mizzou sports, occasional politics, and a funny story thrown in there. They do not participate in rallies for gender equality yet. They have not started organizations dedicated to it. What they did was ask a hard question. These are not guys that have gender studies degrees from Oxford, some wise wizardly types that have special revelations. No. This is one of the guys I'm talking about. Meet Corey. Corey is really smart and really funny. He's an ad executive down in Dallas, and he's kicking butt and climbing the ladder as we speak. And this is Scott. Scott, among other things, likes climbing mountains, extreme sports, and working out. Ben asked these guys a really simple question, and almost all of them responded. And I think what happened was too good to paraphrase. So I'm going to read you some parts of the emails from Corey and Scott specifically. We do need to have a conversation about gender equality. This actually shouldn't get swept under the rug. But in order to do so, it's important that we start from a place of humility and honesty. This is not a binary issue. Saying, I'm married, I respect women, I would never do that, that guy was crazy, is a complete cop-out. Because I've spent enough time with all of you, and I know your backgrounds well enough, that you all have some sexist tendencies. I do too. Culturally, you cannot grow up in the male-dominated society that we did, in the male-dominated families that we did, and not have some. And that's the truth. Look, we all support Yes All Women, that's clear. But that does not mean that we still aren't part of the problem, even if in a small way. And we have to be able to admit that in order to change ourselves. So, where do you sit on this spectrum? Do you outwardly hate and objectify women? Probably not. So let's not start there. Let's talk about what you do struggle with. I work in a company that's a bit of an all-boys club. I say that I support women as my equal, but if I'm being really, really honest, most of the women at my office outwork me because on some level, I actually believe that I'm naturally more gifted than they are. Until Tina Fey and Kristen Wiig came into my life, I would say things like, women just aren't as funny as men, and I actually believed it. My wife runs 60-plus miles a week, and to this day, I still consider myself a better athlete than her. That's effing crazy. Have you guys seen me lately? I know I got subtle messages growing up that my mom was irrational, that she was the servant of the house, that she wasn't as smart, that she was just the support team for my dad, all kinds of messages. So what is it for you? What are the little sexist tendencies or opinions that you harbor? Who can you talk to about them? Who can you reconcile them with? I would strongly recommend having the conversation with somebody that makes you uncomfortable. Uncomfortable because they'll challenge you, someone that will disagree with you and call you on it. You'll know it's the right person if it's a really hard conversation to have. And there you have it. Are Corey and Scott the MLK Juniors of gender inequality? No, not really. In fact, when I asked for permission to use their emails, Corey said yes, but that he had to admit he's literally never really thought about it until now. I believe that there are a lot of Corey and Scotts in this audience. I believe that there are a lot of really good men sitting before me. And I believe wholeheartedly that if you used your voice and your status and your unique platform, that you would leave our generation better than the one we came into. I believe that when we all, men and women, move past our hurt and our shame and our egos and our pride and our fear, we all want really similar things for our sons and for our daughters. As part of that belief, I'm right now, this second, launching a website called boyswillbe.com. It is a place for men to contribute to the conversation about what does it mean that boys will be boys, and what do you dream that it will mean for your sons and for the men that come after you. Listen, whether you choose to acknowledge it or not, you are writing the story. You get to be part of the decision. So stand up, accept the challenge, and be a part of creating a legacy. Thank you.